start?
The old saying is, how do you eat an elephant?
Yeah.
One bite at a time.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? And so I think that's maybe good advice too. You just have to start somewhere.
Yeah.
Welcome to Hallway Conversations. We're a trio of educators who have plenty of questions about teaching and learning and school culture, and we believe in the value of reflection and collaboration as we seek to keep growing as teachers. This podcast is our place for thinking out loud together about issues in education and why they might matter to Christian educators. Welcome to the conversation.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 93rd episode of the Hallway Conversations podcast. My name's Matt Beamers.
I'm Abby DeGroat.
And I'm Dave Mulder.
Friends, we're always looking for topics of conversation and feedback, so please email us or send us a recording of your question to hallwayconvospod@gmail.com. That's hallwayconvospod@gmail.com. We're looking for relevant and timely ideas, so please let us know if you have a show topic ruminating around in your head. Dave and Abby, this week we received an email from Emma, who will begin her first year of teaching in the fall. Congratulations, Emma. But in her email, I could feel both excitement and some nerves as she prepares for her initial year in the classroom, which makes sense to me because after many years, I still feel excitement and nerves at the beginning of the school year.
Yep.
And while each of her questions could be its own podcast, Dave suggested maybe we take a rapid fire approach and spend a few minutes on each of them. So Dave and Abby, I'm going to try to set a timer. I have little confidence that's actually going to work.
You know this is not going to work.
And I also have little confidence that I can multitask this. So let's see what happens.
Sure.
So one of Emma's first questions was, how do new teachers integrate themselves well into a school that has norms that I don't know yet? Or how do I get to know the culture of a school that I've hardly set foot in? So think about that. Most of these first-year teachers will be, and I'm also actually thinking of veteran teachers going to new schools, because that's a reality too.
For sure.
And maybe they won't set foot into that building, who knows, July, early August. Everyone's different. But how do you go about learning about a school culture that you know nothing about? Any thoughts?
It's interesting just to think about back in my first teaching job when you're kind of trying to get the lay of the land, and how do you know what you don't know, right? Like that's I think that's what I'm reading in her question here, right? And for me, a lot of it was I found an experienced colleague who'd been there for a long time, and someone who I got to know just informally as a mentor. And she was great for just like after a faculty meeting, she'd be like, okay, so here's what's going on and why that question came up. And that kind of person to just have
like
someone
to
who you trust.
backfill some of that knowledge that you would otherwise not know.
And I mean, that's something incumbent on school leaders too, to make sure that they're explaining the why behind things to the new faculty as well. But I'll speak for myself. I don't always do real great at telling people, you don't know. Like we sometimes forget that when we've been in a place for a long time. And so I think that's maybe a way to try to take the temperature, at least kind of what's happening. If you can find somebody, an experienced colleague who feels like they're a safe person for you to just come and say, there's no stupid questions here. I got to know what's going on.
Yeah. And I think too, there's a lot of things at schools that teachers can do that are optional that, even like back to school nights or like those, you have to be at, but there's also like games or gatherings or events for only families that teachers are welcome at but aren't required to attend. Things like that I think are great places to go with the intention of learning more. I taught at a high school, so there was ample extracurricular opportunities, right? To go watch students because I learned a ton about my student athletes by watching them, for example. And I learned a ton of the who's who and how does this work and all of those things by attending some of those things that weren't required of me, and that sometimes I had to work to make myself go do after a day of school. But I think are big payoffs if you can go and just absorb some of that there too. Yeah,
and I think just trying to find someone or just as you quickly build relationship. Just that question of what do I need to know that no one's really telling me? Like what's the hidden curriculum? And it can be everything from, I remember coming here and going to our first faculty gathering and just having the courage to say something like, is the expectation I dress up? Is shorts and t-shirt okay? Like just those types of things that maybe people assume, people assume that everybody knows, but every culture is different. So there's different expectations around that. And I think also just trying to pay attention to what's going on. Just kind of notice and wonder, but I think just having the courage to ask questions, to know that everybody in that building has been a first-year teacher. Right. Not everyone there is thinking like a first-year teacher, so I think it's similar, right? Is that they're not telling you because they want to treat you poorly or they want to ignore you.
It's just not on the front.
It's just not on the front. But when you ask, I generally have found people are more than willing to help. So I'm having the courage to ask. All right, question number 2, and I already forgot the timer, but we'll keep going here. How do I get students to trust me that don't know me yet? Thinking about, again, true for all of us, that first day of whether it's K to 12, whether it's university, we have a number of students who we've literally never seen. Emma's going to be in the same position. How do you get students to trust you even though they don't know you?
I think you have to do some sort of level of self-disclosure on that first day. If you want self-disclosure from students, I think you have to be willing. So, like, one of my things in Analysis College, but I always put together a little slide about myself, right, at the beginning, because I'm going to ask them to tell me a little bit about them. So I kind of answer generally the same things I'm going to ask them. Because I do think you have to know them and they have to know you before that trust can develop.
Totally.
Yeah.
I always call that the golden rule for teachers, right? Never ask students to do things you wouldn't be willing to do yourself. And that I totally agree with what you just said, Abby, that sense of self-disclosure. And that doesn't mean you need to spill your whole life story to them or anything like that.
It can be curated. It can be like packaged, you know, but you have to be really willing to go first.
Yeah. And I think also just being curious about who they are, like asking them about their, obviously getting to know their name, but just, again, paying attention, but asking them about, hey, what do you love? Being curious about the small details that may have nothing to do with school, have nothing to do with curriculum or homework, or just being interested in them so that they walk away feeling like, I matter to this new teacher.
And it can be really hard, especially I'm thinking for middle school and high school teachers where you've got a lot of students coming through your classroom every day, so like to keep track of that. And not that you need to like sit down and quick take notes on every student you have, but if somebody says something significant, it's not a bad idea to just jot that one down. And so you can like have a couple of notes for yourself to remember about, this student, I got to remember this.
Or even like some sort of exit ticket or entrance ticket to start to put faces to names and remember details.
I remember a teacher on the first day inviting students. I think the question was something like, when you feel supported by me, what does that look like as your grade 6 teacher? Or is there anything I need to know about learning that you love or that is hard? Like just anything like that, again, and allowing them to do that privately. And I've also even seen people send something like that home to parents, just like, hey, what is something I need to know about your child that's going to be helpful for me to help them succeed? And you're not asking them to bare their soul, but just, hey, any little insight that helps you as a teacher is going to help them succeed. And when you want when you have their best in mind, I think that does naturally build trust.
One more thing I'll suggest for that too. I found it's really helpful. I did this with middle schoolers. I've done this with graduate students to be really clear about like, here are my expectations. So what you can expect from me, and also what I expect of you. And to be able to just say that, and clear as kind for that too.
Absolutely.
Just lay it out there for them.
Yeah, I remember Marcus Todd, a wonderful teacher that I taught with. Just developing some of those norms as a class, even like your voice matters. This isn't just I trust you to have input into what we're going to value as a class, and you can guide that as a teacher. But finding ways to elevate their voice, I think, is always helpful. What's the best or worst advice you got about teaching. I think we actually did a podcast about this.
so, too.
80 episodes. This
Long,
could have
long
been
time
pre-Abby.
This might have been
even.
before Abby joined us.
But
even.
Abby, how about you? You think about
Yeah.
advice you
I don't know that it was pre-teaching. I think it was during my first year. The advice that I'm thinking of. One of the veteran teachers who taught down the hall from me at break one day came in my room and sat in one of the desks. It was afternoon, right? And it was, I don't know what was going, but he could probably see that I was stressed. And he looked at me and he said, "You are doing more work than your students are.
Oh, wow.
And they should be the ones doing the work because that is how they learn."
Interesting.
Wow.
And he said, "You should not be doing more work than they are."
Yeah, that's a good reminder, though.
It was a good reminder that I shouldn't just be the one preparing and talking, right? It was what can I design and how can I get them involved.
It's really powerful.
It was really
actually.
powerful. Yeah, it was really good advice.
I got
later
some
on.
great advice from my mentor, Dave Skalhouse, when I was a senior in university, just about the importance of planning. Like, don't underestimate the importance of planning and how that trickles down, not just into pedagogy and learning, but culture and classroom discipline.
Oh, yeah.
And so he just stressed so much, Matt, is like, don't always go in with a solid plan, because and it made me realize there's often a correlation between, man, class doesn't seem like it's going well, or and this plan actually isn't that well tight. And then I just think of when I was student teaching with Bill Elgersma, who's also a mentor for me, him just reminding to take Friday nights off. Like, there's always work.
That's good advice.
And he said
That is good
if
advice.
you can walk away from it on Friday, even if you get back to it on Saturday, just make sure you just take a few hours where you're just like, I'm done for a little while. So. What if you have a different approach than a seasoned teaching partner? So this is a really interesting for me to think about, because we're on the other end of that, I guess, right? We have.
Are you calling us seasoned?
That's not the word. That's not the
what
word.
you were doing right there?
It's not the word I feel like that's the hospitable word here. Okay, as older, I mean, as veteran teachers.
Teachers
as
who
people
have
have
some
done
experience.
this for more than 1 year.
Yeah.
So now you have a new, and I can remember being that new teacher coming in with all these ideas and all this energy.
Right.
How do you balance, again, being who you are and having these new ideas and energy and working with someone who does have more experience, and you're gonna have different approaches? How do you balance, like, hey, like, this is a veteran teacher with lots of wisdom, and also being like, hey, like, we teach who we are. Thoughts on that, Dave?
Well, I think
because that can cause conflict.
Oh, it can, for sure. So I'm thinking of this, the class I'm teaching this summer is issues in education. That's part of my argument in that whole course. Anytime there's issues in education, almost always it's because there's a conflict of philosophies or a conflict of worldviews. And conflict is very real, right? So I think for me as a new teacher to have the humility to know that I don't have this all figured out yet, right? I think that is an important piece of it.
It is.
But also, two things can be true, as Abby sometimes says. To have that humility, but also to say, just because someone has been doing this for 20 years doesn't mean they have it all figured out either, right? And I think both of those things can be true. And so to discern when is the right time to press in and when is the right time to just go along, that's the harder question for me. And I don't have a tidy answer for that one, unfortunately.
Right.
I don't know.
And I think, too, as a new teacher, I think it's important to be true to who you are in your classroom.
Yes.
I would be reticent to try to expand my opinion outside of my classroom as a new teacher, right? To really get to know what I believe and what works about it and why I think that, and to have a solid grounding in it before I'm going to go out and try to influence other people in that. And I would learn and listen and watch a lot. And but also teach who I am in my room when at all possible, right?
And again, for new teachers to have the humility to say when things are going sideways or not the way you wish they would, to like step into a seasoned veteran colleague's classroom and say, hey, help me out here, right? And I think most veteran colleagues, healthy veteran colleagues, will give you kind, specific, helpful advice.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's so important, Dave. Like I think, find those people who, when you say I'm having a bad day or it didn't go well, just sit and listen, right? It's like, that's hard. Like that they empathize with you. Because it's not always safe to share that with everyone if we're honest, right?
That's right.
And so find those people, but I also think find those people who will give you healthy feedback. Like it's easy in any school to find people who are going to dump on the students, or it's their fault, or and I think you want to be careful with that too on the bad days, just to not point the finger right away, but just say
or the system, or the principal, or the whatever it is.
To have the courage, to say, what could I have done differently, or it just, for whatever reason, it just didn't go that well, and not to blame it all on yourself, but also not to blame it all on everyone. You just don't hit a home run every day.
No, we don't. That's the reality.
That's the reality of it. So, hey, here's another good question. I'm curious to hear your answers on this. How do you get to know a new curriculum when you're staring down new school, new curriculum, you've never had your own classroom, you got 9 months in front of you? That can be really intimidating. Where do you start? And then we'll write a book when we answer this question. Where might you start?
The old saying is, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Right? And so I think that's maybe good advice too. You just have to start somewhere. And I would encourage, and I'm basing this on my own experience of not starting that planning ahead process early enough. I'd say like as soon as you have access to the curriculum, take that first bite, right? And just start getting comfy and familiar with what resources do I have at my disposal? What standards do I have to teach in this grade level? And you can't do everything perfectly your first year. So just also recognize that you can't do everything perfectly your first year. And so maybe pick one or two subjects. I'm thinking for elementary teachers, pick one or two subjects that you're going to really focus more on in that first year. And then once you get those ones dialed in a little bit, then that's year 2, you can choose another subject or two, right? For middle school, high school teachers, you might have to do the same kind of thing. Not to say we're going to just like throw up our hands and say, we can't do it, it's too much. Teaching is hard work, right? Like you show up and you do the hard work every day. But we also might have to have less than our ideal situation, especially that first year, right?
But you, Abby, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I think if I would go back and do it again, I would do more backwards planning. Right? Like, so where do I want to be by May?
Yeah, interesting.
Or start even in December. Where do I want to be by the end of the first semester? Yeah. Okay, so now that means I have this much time for this, and this much time for this, and this, and then start doing the detail work. Right? Instead of just starting at the beginning and planning all the details, because then it's easier to get in the weeds and get off track and realize that you only have 2 weeks before the semester ends and you're not,
I have 80 pages to teach in this textbook.
Exactly. So I would block, do some rough blocking and then get into the details.
Yeah, that makes me sends a shiver up my spine of what my first year of teaching when we lived in Montana. We got there at the end of July, beginning of August. I just started writing lesson plans. It was crazy. Like that whole first week, I just started writing lesson plans. And the second week, I was like, I gotta rewrite these, because they were like, I didn't actually look at what was expected. I just wanted to start writing lesson plans, and I think if you can start interacting with the curriculum, just start getting familiar with it. If you can do that, throughout the summer, and then what is the end plan, right? And then go from there. And again, ask your partner teachers, ask people on your team, right? Where do they start, right? What might be
good advice.
What might be a place to start eating the elephant, so to speak.
Yep.
So, hey, there's also moments when you run into students, and whether they're discipline situations or just students say awkward things, or how do you converse with students when you feel awkward and you just don't know what to say? You're literally speechless.
The worst part about teaching middle schoolers is sometimes they say things that are so inappropriate, and it's like the funniest thing, of course, and you can't laugh, right? Well, you can laugh, but only the one time.
Depends.
Right? Depends on the kid, depends on the situation. boy, that is such a hard thing, right? And when kids say something that's awkward in class, like how do you recover, or if the whole class is losing it and you feel that pressure. I remember having those lessons where I felt like I need to somehow be the disciplinarian now, and like I'm going to lay down the law, but all I want to do is laugh along with them, right? And so how do you remain true to yourself while also not losing where you're going with the class, right? Like oh man, that's an impossible situation.
It is. That's hard.
Yeah, I guess I'm just thinking too. Like part of it is if there's a discipline situation. One of the things I try to remind myself of is that sometimes you have more time than you think, right? So too often I think when I felt like I had to say something, I said the wrong thing. So like especially if you can feel yourself being upset, like how do I step back? How do I buy myself time? Or sometimes you have to save a student from themselves, right? Like they just end up talking and can't stop, and for whatever reason. Yeah. And so sometimes it's I can remember watching a teacher, observing a teacher and a student in their class being like that, and it was like, oh, like this is just you felt awkward for everyone, and the teacher giving the student something like a stapler or a piece of paper and say, okay, bring this to the office. Like they save the student from this awkward situation, like without shame, and I just thought, man, that was just really brilliant teaching, right? And you're going to have times as a teacher where you need to save students socially and they don't know how to get out of it themselves.
Right. And just give them a little bit of space that way to recover. Yeah. The other thing I would say is if it is a discipline situation, don't humiliate kids publicly, right? So like if you have to discipline kids, always do that part privately. And if that means like stepping out into the hall for just a second with them, if it can wait until later, keep them for a minute and have that conversation after class.
And something I've learned too with my own kids and with high school kids, with middle school kids, get curious, right? Often there is more going on than you have any idea is going on. Yeah. Like, oh, that's why you're freaking out because I didn't realize this just happened to you. Right. And like so often I think when you just react instead of getting curious first, you get yourself into a deeper hole. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I wrote that too down. Yeah. I wrote that down. I said, ask a question. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Ask a question. Try to lead with a question if you can.
Make an observation. You seem stressed.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Is there something I need to know? Is there
something going on?
Yeah. Yep. No, and I think a lot of times kids want to tell you, actually, like students want to share, like it is this pent up anxiety or whatever. Sure. And even if in the moment they don't, just that you notice that, even that can take the pressure off for them. Mm-hmm. I think this is the last question's a great one, Dave and Abby. It's simply, what if I get it wrong? What if I get it wrong?
And you will.
And you will. Yeah.
We all do.
We all do. Yeah, that's a good question. And I think this is just the hard truth, and I've said it before and I'll say it again, right? Teaching is not for the faint of heart. This is hard work. It's good work. It's the best profession I can imagine. I love it. And it is just hard. Yeah. And we don't get it right all the time. Right? So, okay, name that. How then do we develop the resilience to deal with that reality, right? Yeah. And so you got to have some strategies in place for when things go sideways, because they will. How are you going to recover? So you got to know yourself, right? So like for me, I'm going to go get on my bike and I'm just going to go pedal out my aggression for a while because some days are like that, right? Or take a walk or whatever, right? And there's healthier and unhealthier ways to cope, but I think that oftentimes exercise is a good one to just bleed off the stress.
Yeah, and I think where appropriate, you can name it to students if they were involved, or to colleagues, right? Like, hey, I wish I hadn't done that yesterday. Yeah. I didn't react well
that's right.
to that.
And owning that.
Naming it. Mm-hmm. I think that's an important part. I always think that if we are expecting students to apologize and move on and learn, we have to be willing to model that as teachers too. And I think a lot of teachers feel like they can't, because then their authority somehow, but I actually think it gains you more credit and trust and
because you're a real human being
and stands with students,
right? Instead of being this caricature up in front of the classroom, you're a real human being.
I think too, trying trying just not to carry it all, right? Whether that's journaling, whether it's having a professional conversation, or just, hey, can I talk this through with you? Like, I just feel like, can you feed back to me what you're hearing me say? Like, do I need to contact a parent? Just seeking wise counsel. I also think that going for a bike ride, going for a ride, going for a walk, whatever that looks like, I think sometimes I know I could have a tendency when I got it wrong, then I'm going to stay at school longer and longer and longer.
Right.
And you can be there till 6:30, and you're actually not getting anything done except replaying it something over and over in your head. And sometimes the best thing you can do is get away for an hour, and it's maybe you come back to it that night, but just get out of there for a bit, then come back and regroup. And I know it's really easy to say be kind to yourself.
But that's a real thing,
but
too.
I think that is a real thing. Like, be kind to yourself. Friends, we know that your time is valuable, and we want to thank you for joining us today for another hallway conversation. Whether it is this day, this week, this month, or this summer, we hope that the Lord gives you what you stand in need of, and we'd like to send you from here with this blessing. So to our listeners, who we are so thankful for, may the road rise up to meet you. May the wind be always at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face. The rains fall soft upon your fields. And until we meet again, may God hold you in the palm of his hand. Thanks for listening, everybody. Have a good week.
This podcast was literally dreamed up during one of our actual hallway conversations. Our music is by Ethan Mulder. Hallway Conversations is created and produced by Matt Beamers, Abby DeGroat, and Dave Mulder. Hey, we have a favor to ask of you. Would you be willing to rate this podcast or write a review in your podcast app? Or if you found this conversation interesting or helpful, would you consider sharing it on your social media? Those things really do help podcasters out, and we would be so, so grateful. Thanks for listening, friends.
Man, good advice, you guys.
Good work. No.
Hey, and welcome to the party, new teachers.
Yeah, right? No, it's true, though, right? Like, it's...